How's it going, laser bruisers? I'm Bobby Sixkilla and welcome back to Shinrai, Broken Beyond Despair. We just finished our investigation of this room with our two corpses in it. I don't think there's anything more to find in here. We did find out a few little interesting tidbits of information, but nothing too breakthrough. I mean, it's pretty much an open and shut case, at least as far as Hero's death goes. Carmen did it, right? We saw her do it. And we've caught her too, so let's get out there and talk to them all. There might be more to discover here. Ooh, okay, I didn't know that. I'm glad it told me that though. I nearly missed it. What else was there that was relevant? I'll bring you back once I find something that is relevant. There's just a bathrobe and another food on inside, nothing else, although I guess it can't hurt to take another look. Actually, wait a second. There seems to be something wrapped up inside the futon. And there's dark stains on it. Is that blood? Well, now isn't that interesting? I've been wondering why Carmen isn't wearing her witch's hat and cape, but to think I'd find both of them here. I wonder why they were hidden like this. In any case, this is a very important evidence, so I'd better make a note of it. Are they covered in blood as well? Are we done now? Alright, I think that's about it. I doubt there might be anything else around that could be an important clue, so I should head back to Taiko and Carmen? Yeah, I guess I should about wrap it up. So that's how it went. Even though I shouldn't have felt like it, a confident smile spread across my lips. Yeah, I now understood exactly what happened here tonight. I'd found all the clues and evidence I needed to piece everything together and even prove it. There was no doubt left in my mind that I'd arrived at the truth. Well, you're smarter than I am, lady. With this, the nightmare was finally over. Because I don't know what the hell's going on. Chapter 5. Revelation. Must be the last chapter then. Alright, here we go. A heavy, almost suffocating silence had once again seized the dining hall. Internally trying to process what had occurred here tonight, as well as to understand how it could have come to this tragedy, we were all gathered around one of the dinner tables. All of us except Rai. She was currently in the manager's office making a few phone calls. Apart from her, everyone was present though. Even Katoba. While Taiko and I had been on the second floor, the others had carefully carried him here. His charred corpse was lying on the table furthest away from us, covered by a white blanket. Even though I couldn't see his body, I tried not to look in his direction. Every time I did, the image of his disfigured corpse flashed before my mind's eye, and I noticed the faint stench of his burned flesh in my nostrils again. Taiko was naturally upset the most. With quivering lips and shaking hands, he kept glancing over to Katoba again and again, as though to make sure he wasn't dreaming and that his best friend really was dead. The only reason he managed not to break down into tears was probably because he was focusing on his anger, focusing it on Carmen, who was sitting at the opposite side of the table. She was quiet now, like the rest of us, her eyes drilling holes into the table's surface. From the moment we'd brought her up here until just a few minutes ago, she'd been weeping, however, mourning the loss of her best friend until her tears had dried up. Maybe she didn't have any left now. Or maybe she realised that acting sad and broken wasn't going to win her any sympathy. At least that's what the others were telling her through their expressions. In regular intervals, each of them glared at Carmen for a couple of moments, showering her with anger, disdain, disbelief and disgust. No one could understand. Why had she done these terrible things to her classmates? To her friends? Everyone wanted to ask these questions, but in the end no one did. Maybe they were afraid to hear her reasons. Maybe they didn't even want to hear them. Carmen had killed our friends. There was absolutely no justification for that. She was a murderer, and so she was treated as such. Taiko had even had her tied up to ensure she wasn't going to escape or hurt anyone else. At first she'd resisted and fought against getting restrained, of course, but now it seemed as though she'd given up all hope and simply accepted her fate. Alright, I'm back. And? The police said they'll be here as soon as possible. It's hard for them to say how long it'll take though. Apparently there was an accident involving a truck on the mountain road. What? Yeah, my exact reaction. Looks like it went way too fast on its way back from the city and now the road's blocked. Didn't happen that long ago either, so it'll be a while before they can get here. Well, I guess that means all we can do now is wait, huh? Yeah, looks like it. She closed the sliding doors behind her and joined us at the table. Once she was sitting next to Taiko, it became completely silent again. The atmosphere was unbearably tense, even more so than it had been before. Out of the 7 people gathered in this room, not a single one said a word. Even the usually so cheerful and energetic Mika looked rather miserable, which is quite an odd sight. It was to be expected though. It was late, we were tired and exhausted, and I guess I didn't need to mention it. Bara-chan leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. She was trying hard not to doze off. It was starting to get difficult for me to keep my eyes open as well, but I still couldn't allow myself to fall asleep. Not yet. There was something that needed to be resolved first, and maybe now, with everyone present, it was the right time to do so. There was nothing else left to do but wait anyway. Before I actually got a chance to raise my voice, however, Aika-san, why? Why did you do it? Finally, so I managed to ask that question that's been weighing on everyone's mind. All of us immediately look at Carmen, waiting for a response, but there was none. Carmen didn't even raise her head to look at Runa. Just like when we found her upstairs, she seemed completely absent-minded. Mori-san and Shirataki-san were your friends, were they not? How could you do this to them? And Gaikoku-san too. What did they do to deserve this? We waited another few moments for an answer, but Carmen didn't show any reaction. I'd kind of given up hope that she would, but just when Runa was about to speak again, it wasn't me. It was faint, almost like a whisper, but all of us heard it. With tears welling up in her eyes again, she continued in an unstable, shaky voice that seemed like it could break at any second. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. You have to believe me. I didn't do it. Do you honestly think we believe that? You're the only one who could have started the fire. The others even saw you kill Hiro. Don't try to talk yourself out of this. But it wasn't me. I swear. Well, if it wasn't you, who was it, huh? Once again, we were all waiting for a response, but nothing came. Of course you wouldn't have an answer for that, because you're the one who did it, right? At the very least, have the decency to admit to your crimes. You owe that to your victims. And to us, who foolishly thought of you as a friend. Or do you want me to squeeze a confession out of you? No, it wasn't me. I swear it wasn't me. Please believe me. I didn't. The tone of her voice became more desperate, as did the expression on her face. Even she seemed to realize that, in the face of the facts, it was hard to buy anything she said. You were missing for quite a long while. Ever since the discovery of Momoka's body, you didn't return to the dining hall. If you didn't kill Hiro and start the fire during that time, what else have you been doing? Care to explain? I did nothing. I was just hiding. Hiding? Sure. And from what were you hiding, and where? And why didn't you come back to the dining hall? To where everyone else is waiting for you? Cat got your tongue? It looked like Carmen didn't have anything to counter. Taiko had brought up a few valid points after all. She had been missing for a rather long time, so if she hadn't killed anyone as she claimed, then what exactly had she been doing, and where had she been hiding? This truly seemed mighty suspicious, and the fact that she couldn't really explain it to us didn't help her case either. But neither did the fact that Rai, Bara-chan and I had seen her ram that knife into Hiro's throat. No matter how you look at it, everything pointed to her. And no amount of tears she produced seemed to convince anyone otherwise. After all, we all knew how great of an actress she was. That's turned out to be a skill that bit her in the ass. I didn't kill them. I would never kill anyone, especially not Momo. I would never kill her. Why would I kill my best friend? Huh? Come on. The fact alone that you were friends makes you the most likely suspect. We don't think she killed it. I thought Hiro killed Momo, and then Taiko killed Hiro as in revenge. What? Whenever people are close, it's easy for frictions to arise between them. Momoko is only close to two people, Hiro and you. She barely talked to anyone else. As far as I know, she basically never met anyone but you two outside of school. In other words, you and Hiro would be the most likely people with a motive, since you were the only ones who really had anything to do with it. No, you got it wrong. That's not... Stop it. Taiko's sudden yelling startled not only Carmen, but every single one of us. Furious, he rose to his feet, staring at her with white-knuckled fists. Stop trying to talk yourself out of this. I'm sick of your goddamn bullshit. All I want to hear is the reason why you did this. You set my best friend on fire, goddammit. You left him in the basement to burn fucking alive. Do you have any idea what the hell you've done? His yelling only made things worse. Carmen tried to find the strength to reply, but the tears just kept coming, drowning everything she wanted to say. Helplessly, she looked at each of us, hoping someone would come to her aid, that any of us would take her side. But of course no one did. On the contrary, I also want to know, to think that one of my friends is a murderer. Please, at least tell us why. Why did you kill them? What Carmen did was despicable, but Carmen at least owes us an explanation. Come on, Carmen. You had a reason to do these things, don't you? I mean, surely you wouldn't kill anyone just cause, right? Just tell us, Aika-san. What did Mori-san, Shirataki-san, and Gaikoku-san do to deserve this? Before she could get anything else, her voice cracked in a high-pitched squeal, followed by uncontrolled wailing. Taking several frantic breaths, she kept looking around for help, but all she found was contempt. Taiko continued yelling, basically trying to force a confession out of her. I honestly felt sorry for Carmen. It was hard to believe that her reaction was merely acted, but I seemed to be the only one thinking that way. No one else felt any pity for her. They'd made it quite clear. The only one that hadn't yet was me. Maybe that was why her big wet eyes kept coming back to mine. Curses, I didn't know why now. Of all times, it was so hard for me to raise my voice. But I couldn't let it go on like this. I had to do something, so... Once again, silence. My palms hurt a little, but at least everyone's attention was now directed at me. They looked pretty bewildered. Even more so when I rose to my feet and began to speak. Okay, that's enough. You're going too far, and you're being unreasonable. Unreasonable? What are you talking about? If you haven't noticed yet, you're scaring her. Just like everyone else here, Carmen's quite shaken. Which is understandable considering she lost her best friend tonight. Yeah, because she killed her. Come on, don't tell me you're falling for her act. You know the truth, don't you? So how can you come to her defense like that? Without replying, I marched around the table. Everyone's puzzled gazes following me. None of them could believe it when I crouched down behind Carmen to untie her hands. Not even Carmen herself. Shimpuku? What are you doing? Sorry, I shouldn't have let them tie you up in the first place. Huh? I sat down next to her, taking her cold, shaking hands into mine. For a moment, her confusion stopped the flood of tears. I bet I was the last person she'd expected to do something like this. Unable to believe it, she gaped at me, waiting for an explanation. Just like everyone else. What you doing, Raika-chan? You can't honestly believe her. I mean, we saw her, remember? We saw her kill Hiro. And she's the only one who could have started the fire. Which means that she's also going to be the one who killed Momoko. She even killed her best friend. She did not kill her best friend. What? She didn't kill Momoko? Once again, everyone stared at me with widened eyes. Especially Carmen, who looked like she was unsure whether or not she could trust her ears. Shimpuku? Are you serious? Of course I am. You didn't kill Momoko. I'm absolutely certain of that. Yeah. Hiro did. As her eyes got even bigger, I noticed a glimmer of hope sparking inside them. Though you did kill Hiro. For a moment she looked extremely relieved and happy that her call for help had been answered. However, this relief and happiness is only short-lived. What the heck are you saying? If Carmen didn't kill Momoko, then who did? Yeah, someone's got to have killed her. And earlier, when the whole murder theory came up, it was said that only 4 people would have been able to do it. Yes, everyone who ran after her during the first blackout. And if you're saying it wasn't Carmen, that only leaves 3 others. So this was it. The moment of truth. It was finally time to present them results of my investigation. What had transpired here tonight was a rather complex chain of events, but I was going to explain everything as best I could. Here we go. So that they too would be able to understand the tragic truth behind it. To be quite honest, I still hadn't figured out everything myself. There were still some questions I couldn't answer. That's why I had been hesitant about speaking up, but I guess there was no turning back now. I just had to solve those remaining questions along the way to my truth. And the first step to getting there was to state the name of the one responsible for Moko's mysterious death. I still say Hiro. Hiro? Hiro killed Momoko? Are you sure about that? Yes, I'm absolutely positive. Well, if we assume that his relationship with Momoko really was that strained, I can see it as a motive, but... Hiro got killed too. How could he be the murderer if he became a victim himself? That doesn't make any sense. There could be 2 murderers? Why not? Huh? It only wouldn't make sense if we assumed there was only 1 murderer. Hold on a minute, Shimpuku-san. You're not honestly suggesting that... That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Everyone was speechless as those words left my mouth with unwavering confidence. Until now, no one had probably considered it, so it must have come as quite the shock. Unfortunately, though, it was the truth. Not only 1, but 2 of our classmates have become murderers tonight. But if Hiro is 1 murderer, who's the other, Aku? The answer should be obvious. If Raika-chan's right, there's only 1 other person who could have done it. I think I'm finally beginning to understand what happened here. When Taiko raised his head to look at the culprit, everyone followed his gaze. Yes, there was only one of us who came into question. She'd been the center of attention before, And now, with 6 pairs of eyes glued to her, she became so once again. Yes, it was you, Carmen. You killed Hero. What? No, it wasn't me. I didn't kill anyone. I swear. I didn't kill anyone at all. I'm sorry, Carmen. You didn't kill Momoko, that much is true. And as someone who cannot tolerate false accusations, I had to clear that up. However, you cannot escape your actual guilt. You are the one who stabbed Hero. And you are the one who started the fire in the basement. Those are your crimes. Carmen was completely speechless. She looked quite shocked, to say the least. I guess she'd been hoping for me to prove her completely innocent, but I couldn't do that. I simply couldn't twist the truth for the sake of someone who was without a doubt guilty, no matter how sorry I felt for her. Even if she probably hadn't wanted it to come to this, even if, unlike Hero, she never planned to kill anyone tonight, murder was still murder. Are you saying that Shirataki-san had planned to kill Mori-san from the beginning, but Aiga-san never intended to kill anyone? But then, why'd she end up killing Shirataki-san? And not to forget what she did to Gaikoku-san. Yes, there were still a lot of questions that needed to be answered. But by now, I had a pretty good grasp on what had happened. As I said before, what had transpired was a rather complex chain of events, and it all started with the first blackout and Momoko's mysterious suicide. In order to explain everything as comprehensively as possible, it was probably best to start there right at the beginning. And in that case, one question begged to be answered first. We have already established that only 4 people would have had the chance to commit the crime. Everyone who chased after Momoko during the blackout. So Hiro, Carmen, Mika, and Runa. Now, what exactly makes you so sure it was Hiro? What about the other 3? Couldn't it still been Carmen? No. Out of those 4, Hiro is by far the most suspicious. He literally fulfills all the requirements to be the culprit. Requirements? Indeed, my earlier deductions have been correct. I've gone through all of this before, but I guess I have to explain it to the others as well. First of all, in order to pull this off, the culprit must have known about the blackout occurring tonight, correct? Yeah, but how could Hiro have learned about it? Someone obviously told him. And since Ryan and Runa definitely wouldn't have ruined their own prank like that, it could only have been one other person. Carmen. You were involved in the party preparations, and therefore knew about Rai's Halloween program, right? Did you by any chance ever tell Hiro and Momoko about it? Yes, I did, but... I see. So Hiro did know about the blackout in advance. However, the same applies to Runa and Carmen, so that alone doesn't prove anything. That might be true, but don't forget the second requirement. The culprit must have also been able to somehow unlock the guest room on the 2nd floor. And I still don't get how they even did that. I mean, I always kept the keys with me. Except when you gave them to Hiro, remember? Huh? He needed to go take a piss. Very funny. Those lame vampire jokes are the best you can do? I'm disappointed. But what else should I expect from a host who doesn't even manage to unlock the toilets for her guests? Huh? What are you talking about? Do I have to spell it out? I need to take a piss, but the toilet's locked. Oh, right. I gave him the key so he could unlock the restrooms. Dang it, why didn't I even think of this sooner? It seems so obvious now that you say it. So Hiro unlocked the guest room, huh? He's literally the only one who could have done it. Unless you lent the keys to someone else. I definitely didn't. I guess that settles it then. I have to admit, that alone does seem to indicate him as the culprit. That would also explain how Momoko learned about that room. He probably told her and asked her to head there during the blackout. However, why would she fulfill such an odd request? I mean, even if he was her boyfriend, wouldn't she have thought it as kind of strange? Not if they planned the whole thing together. What? Yes, this is the trick used by Hiro to pull off this puzzling crime. He manipulated his victim and turned her into an unknowing accomplice by telling her a simple lie. Thanks to Carmen, both of them knew that Ryan and Runa were going to play a prank on us. A rather morbid prank at that, pretending that one of them was going to kill the other. Wait, you mean... Indeed. When I told Mika about Rai's plan to scare us, she had immediately wanted to devise a counterattack in order to turn the tables on our host. What if Hiro had proposed the very same thing to Momoko? What if he'd asked her that he wanted to play a prank on them? One as morbid as Ryan and Runa's. A prank that involved one of them dying. Would Momoko have said no? Would she have suspected Hiro to actually kill her? Of course not. For her, it would have just been a crude little prank with her boyfriend. One that Ryan and Runa would have deserved for coming up with something like that in the first place. But would Momoko really have gone through with it after their argument? I mean, she seemed super pissed at Hiro. You think she was still in the mood for that? Ah yes, the argument that resulted from Hiro's rather strange horror story. Of course, still playing along with his prank after that seemed a little strange. However, considering that Momoka's suicide had been awfully similar to the death of the girl from that story, there was a simple explanation. Even Taiko seemed to realize it. The whole argument could have been staged. What? You mean they were just pretending to argue? Think about it. First, Hiro tells us a story about a girl committing suicide by hanging herself, and then Momoka ends up doing the exact same thing. Coincidence? Of course not. No, they wanted to make us believe that Momoka was driven to commit suicide by the curse. The curse of that girl from his story. Or rather, that's what Hiro told her, and that's why she played along. What he didn't tell her was that she wasn't merely going to pretend to die, but that she was going to die for real. Yes, it was just as Taiko said. The argument had been a part of the plan, and during the blackout, they'd set their plan in motion. Momoka ran off, and Hiro, Carmen, and Runa followed her. In order for his plan to work, however, Hiro needed to arrive at the guest room before any of the others. Luckily for him, Runa couldn't keep up with them due to her kimono. As for Carmen, he most likely told her to check the third floor, while he would take care of the second. Once she was gone, he hurried over to the guest room in which Momoka was waiting and managed to get inside before Runa arrived upstairs. He killed Momoka, let it look like suicide, and then only needed to wait for the right moment to leave. Since Runa was shouting Momoka's name while she was walking down the dark corridor, he should have been able to determine her position by her voice. After waiting for her to pass by, he used the darkness to his advantage and slipped out of the room unnoticed. I see, and once that was done, all he had to do was wait for the lights to come back on and pretend to find the corpse alongside the others. Yes, when the rest of us arrived, he started barking orders around to ensure that no one would get too close to the corpse. He probably let Carmen come along to confirm Momoka's death, but as we all know, later kicked her out in order to be alone. Probably to make sure he didn't leave any evidence behind, which is also the reason why he needed to cut the phone cord in the reception. He didn't want the police to appear too soon. Wait a sec, sure the phone in the reception was obviously our first choice, but it's not the only one in the resort, which is why the second blackout occurred. The reception phone was only disabled to prevent us from making a call in the short gap between the first and second blackout. Wait, are you saying the second blackout was part of Hiro's plan too? But how? He was inside the second floor guest room the whole time. How could he have caused it? This ain't making sense. It wasn't him, of course, but his accomplice. Huh? Hiro had an accomplice? Don't tell me that was Bingo. Who? The only one that makes sense would be Runa. But I don't know. Kotoba was the one in there, right? I'm gonna guess Runa. Nope. Is it Kotoba? Actually, I thought Kotoba loved her though. Yeah, that was the only answer that made sense. Kotoba suspiciously vanished right before the second blackout, and there's no one else that could have caused it at that time. So you're saying Kotoba switched the power off for Hiro? Nonsense. Hiro and Kotoba could never stand each other. There's no way in hell that he'd help him with anything, let alone killing the girl of his dreams. I don't think that Hiro would have asked him for help either. But he had no choice. Huh? What do you mean? Hiro wasn't able to cause the second power outage himself. He needed help for that. Preferably from someone easy to manipulate who wouldn't ask any questions. You said it yourself just now. Momoka was the girl of his dreams. So, considering Kotoba's personality, do you honestly think that if Momoka had asked him on Hiro's request to help with their prank, he would have refused? No. No, he would have gladly helped her. I guess that would also explain why he didn't open the breaker room when I went down there. Not even after I mentioned Momoka's death. He knew she was going to pretend dying as part of the prank, so it wasn't a surprise to him. Precisely. And that's why Carmen killed both of them. Revenge. It actually makes sense. Mika still doesn't understand though. Why did Hiro end up getting off too? Because something unexpected happened. Aku? I think I get it now. Carmen stayed upstairs with Hiro. He might have kicked her out of the guest room, but he didn't have a key to actually lock her out. Carmen could have entered again at any time. Maybe she caught him doing something suspicious. She realized that Momoka had been murdered and decided to take revenge on the killer. Or it just happened at the heat of the moment when she tried to confront him about it. Either way, you end up killing Hiro right then and there. Isn't that so, Carmen? What? No, that's wrong. You've got it all wrong. That's not what... Stop denying it. Have you already forgotten? Rai-chan, Nobara-chan, and Raika-chan saw you? They saw you kill how you killed Hiro. And as for everyone else who was in the dining hall at the time, only you could have started the fire. Or have you finally come to a better explanation as to what you've been doing all that time? Ever since the second blackout, you've been missing until Raika-chan and I found you out the front of the guest room again. It's a pretty long time. If you want, I'll give you a chance to explain. But it better be something other than a simple I was hiding. So care to enlighten us? Figured as much. I guess it makes it pretty clear. So it really was you, huh? I guess I can understand Hiro, but why'd you want to kill Kotoba? He wasn't really involved in Momoko's murder, and he didn't have a clue that she actually died. She didn't know that though. I guess all she realized was that Kotoba had helped Hiro. And as his accomplice, that made him equally guilty, so she decided to punish him as well. So it was just a misunderstanding? Everyone's eyes directed at her. Carmen just sat there, staring at the floor in silence. Her expression was one of hopelessness and defeat, as though she'd given up. It didn't seem like she wanted to confirm anything, or make any further objections. I guess that was as close as we were going to get to an actual confession. It is hard to believe, but I suppose we've finally arrived at the truth, haven't we? Aige-san really is a murderer. Nevertheless, I cannot help but pity her. Well, I obviously never forgive her what she did for Kotoba, and her actions sure weren't justified. Still, it's kinda hard to be mad at her. Your best friend was murdered after all. Of course she was angry, could only think about making the ones responsible for it pay. In that regard, we're the same. However, I would never resort to murder, no matter what. Following those words, the dining hall was once again filled with nothing but silence. A much heavier and more suffocating silence than before. As we waited for help to arrive, time seemed to pass extra slowly. Eventually, however, we could hear the sirens howling in the distance. When the police were finally here, we obviously told them everything that had happened. As a result, they decided to take Carmen into custody and bring her back to the station for questioning. Of course, they still wanted to conduct a thorough investigation and ask the rest of us a lot of questions as well. However, we were at least allowed to return home and get a good night's rest first. It should have been something to be happy about, but when I saw the officers lead Carmen away, it made me feel really sorry for her. Just like Taiko, I couldn't approve of her actions, but I could understand her. Unlike Hiro, she hadn't planned to kill anyone. However, the pain of losing her best friend had overpowered her rationality and driven her to commit murder. In a sense, I guess Carmen was a victim herself, a victim of her own emotions. Blinded by hate, anger, sadness, and a desire for revenge, she'd committed crimes which she was surely going to regret. And if she did, I wanted to be there for her and give her a second chance. I didn't even really know why. I just felt that way. So it was kind of ironic that in the end, it wasn't her who begged for a second chance. It was me. And not just for a second chance, but most of all for forgiveness. Forgiveness which I should never receive. To this day, Carmen and I haven't spoken another word again, and she still refuses to see me. She probably hates me even more than ever before, but it's not like I can blame her. I'd messed up big time. I made her out to be a murderer in front of everyone when in reality she'd been completely innocent. That's what the police told us just a few days later once they'd finished their investigation. I still can't believe it, just how I'd managed to stray so far from the truth. Oh, shit. That's not good. Okay, how do we get a good end? Return to checkpoint? Where's that gonna leave us? So this is it. The moment of truth. It's finally time to present... Oh my god, we are back here. Alright, let's skip. Who is the culprit? How do I not present her as the... We can't pick Hiro this time. I want to go back to Runa then. Let's try that. What? Runa? Runa killed Momoko? Are you certain about that? That was my initial instinct. Right at the very beginning, I was like, Runa's the one. Remember? You remember. Alright, let's see what happens then. Of course I am. I wouldn't say this if I wasn't. It was Runa. And not only did she kill Momoko, she also responsible for what happened to Hiro and Kotoba. But Shinpuku-san, what would ever lead you to believe such a thing? There must be some mistake here. I did not kill anyone. I would never. Yeah, Runa would never do such a thing. She's no killer. Don't start this again. We've talked about it before. I said it back then and I'll say it again. Runa's innocent. Momoka obviously committed suicide. What's so hard to believe about that? As for Hiro, you, Nobara-chan and I clearly saw Carmen kill him. But did we really see it clearly? What? Think back to what we could actually see. It was pretty dark inside the guest room and the person in front of us was wearing a cape and a red hat with a rather wide brim. That's Hiro's cape and Carmen's hat. Their faces completely obscured by shadows. We only assumed it was Carmen due to the clothes, but can you honestly say you were able to recognize her face? Well, can you? Oh, of course I can. I clearly saw Carmen. There's no doubt it was her. Carmen, come on. Just confess already. Of course Carmen didn't confess anything. All she did was nervously rub her hands while looking around with helpless expression on her face. She didn't know what to do or say. She seemed quite confused actually. I guess she still couldn't believe that I, of all people, was standing up for her. Well, I gotta admit that I didn't really get to see her face. Nobara! It was too dark, and now that I think about it, I didn't see a long ponytail when she jumped out of the window either. That's only because it was hidden under the cape. It was definitely Carmen, I swear. Right, come on, don't lie. If you'd been able to clearly see anything, you would have recognized Hiro's corpse before almost stepping on him. Just admit that it was too dark to identify the person we saw. Fine, I admit it. I didn't see Carmen's face, so what? It doesn't mean that we saw Runa. Rai does have a point. You seem pretty confident in your recitations though. I'm assuming you have proof? Of course I do. What? You've got to be kidding. Raika-chan, I swear, stop it. Runa's innocent, goddammit. Shipuki-san, please rethink this. I did not kill anyone. You must have made a mistake somewhere in your deductions. Frankly, I kind of wish that I'd made a mistake somewhere. I mean, I didn't want to believe that Runa was the culprit either. She'd always been so kind to me, and she was such a polite, well-mannered and caring young lady. It was really hard to imagine her being capable of such atrocities. Unfortunately, I thought about this long and hard and the evidence supported it. There's absolutely no doubt she was the true culprit. In order to prove this to the others, it was probably best to go through tonight's events in chronological order and explain everything, step by step. However, before that, there was one question that begged to be answered first. Why exactly did I even suspect Runa in the first place? Apart from the fact that she was one of the only 4 people that had been given the chance to kill Momoka, there were 2 major reasons. First of all, she had a motive. We'd learned from Rai that Runa had been in love with Hiro, and the hero had shown some interest in her as well. He'd even asked her out a few times before quickly starting to ignore her again. Runa had never learned the reason as to why, but it wasn't hard to imagine one. Not if one considered the fact that Hiro had started going out with Momoka soon after. Of course, it made sense for Runa not only to blame Momoka for taking Hiro away from her, but to also hate Hiro for ditching her like that. Now keeping this in mind, there was one other fact that seemed quite suspicious. Rai originally didn't want to invite Momoka and Hiro because she thought he was still in love with him. She didn't want you to suffer by seeing the 2 of them together. However, you kept insisting that she invite them. And you were so persistent about it that Rai eventually gave in. In other words, you're the only reason Momoka and Hiro even attended this party tonight. Well, yes, but I only wanted Miyamoto-san to be party to be a success. We had to invite as many people as possible. And Shirataki-san and Mori-san are our classmates. It would have been incredibly rude to invite everyone but them. Yeah, that's just the kind of person Runa is. That doesn't mean that she wanted me to invite them just so she could kill them. Well, the fact alone that Runa insisted on Hiro and Momoka getting invited really didn't prove anything. It only made her look more suspicious. However, that wasn't the only thing that did. There were plenty of reasons to suspect her. We knew that in order to kill Momoka, the culprit must have known about the blackout in advance. Moreover, they must have had a chance to either unlock the second floor guest room, or to at least ensure that it was going to be unlocked. Since she'd been involved in the party preparations, Runa had definitely known about the power outage occurring tonight. As for the guest room, Runa has nothing to do with that. I carried the keys with me the entire time and never gave them to anyone but Hiro. Runa never had a chance to unlock the second floor guest room. Like I said, she didn't necessarily have to unlock it. She simply had to make sure that it wasn't going to get locked. And it would have certainly been possible for her to ensure that. Huh? How? And when? You said that before the first guests arrived, you and Runa made sure to lock all the rooms in the entire resort, correct? Yeah, why? Did you ask Runa at any point in time if you'd already locked a specific door? Well, a couple of times actually. There's so many doors I kinda lost track of which ones I'd locked and which ones I hadn't. Probably should have locked all the doors on one side of the corridor first instead of going for a zigzag pattern. As I'd thought, Rai was quite an airhead sometimes, and Runa must have used that to her advantage. Anyway, what does that have to do with anything? But if you asked Runa if you'd already locked a specific door and she replied with a yes, even though in reality, you hadn't locked it at all. See? She definitely would have had the chance to make sure that one of the rooms would have been open. Maybe, but having the chance to do something and actually doing it are two entirely different things. Indeed. You also mentioned earlier that I would have had the opportunity to kill Mori-san. However, that does not mean that I actually acted upon that opportunity. And I can guarantee you that I did not. Shinpuku-san, please. You're making a giant mistake here. I did not kill anyone. You know what? What you told us so far does make Runa seem quite suspicious. There's no doubt that everything you said could be true. That's why I, too, suspected her in the first place. However, it's just as I say. If you cannot actually prove that Runa killed Momoko, then everything you just said now is baseless conjecture. So can you? Can you prove that Runa killed Momoko? Yes, somehow. What? Really? How? Well then go ahead. Show us your proof. Yes? Curses, maybe I've bitten off a little more than I could chew. I actually didn't have any evidence that proved that Runa had murdered Momoko, did I? Well, okay, I do admit that it would be rather hard to prove. However, I don't really think I need to. What's that supposed to mean, Shinpuku-san? You're accusing me of murder here and you cannot even prove it? Well, I might be unable to prove that you killed Momoko, but I can prove that you killed Hiro. And proving that alone should be sufficient enough, shouldn't it? What are you even talking about? Such proof cannot exist either, as I did not kill anyone. Neither Mori-san nor Shirataki-san. Well, she says she has proof, so let's hear her out. Kakai-san, how could you even listen to her? She could not prove that I killed Mori-san, so why should we continue listening to such ridiculous nonsense? Whether it's ridiculous nonsense or not will be decided after she's shown us her proof. I cannot believe this. Runa's eyes were filled with consternation and disbelief as she looked at me. She quietly asked me how I could do this to her, how I could betray her like this. However, it wasn't like I had fun doing this, although you've got a big smile on your face. On the contrary, it was rather hard. Nevertheless, she was a murderer. I knew it. And I couldn't stand by and watching how someone innocent was framed instead of the real culprit. I had to expose the truth, no matter how ugly it was going to be. Mika doesn't really get it. Why does Raiko think that someone other than Carmen killed Hiro anyway? Just because Carmen's face was not recognizable in the dark, Aku? Well, there's one thing that's been bothering me about us witnessing Hiro's death. I realized it thanks to something that Rai had said earlier. Something I said? It was when Taiko asked if we were sure that Hiro was dead. I mean, sure, I didn't exactly check for a pulse or anything, but Carmen rammed that knife right into his throat. He definitely died on the spot. Poor guy couldn't even scream. Not only did Hiro not scream, he didn't make a sound at all. Or even move for that matter. Don't you think he would have tried to resist or fight for his life? Now that you mention it, that sure is kind of weird. Are you saying that he was already dead when you witnessed the stabbing? That would be the only logical conclusion, wouldn't it? Which makes us witnessing the whole thing quite odd. Before we entered the room, Ryan knocked at the door a couple of times. Wouldn't the culprit have been alarmed by that? Yeah. Usually you'd expect that if they didn't want to get caught, they'd immediately try to escape. Especially if the victim was already dead. Indeed. However, despite Hiro already being dead, they did not try to escape upon hearing the knocking. Instead, they waited for us to open the door and then rammed the knife into the dead body once more. Which begs the question, why do that and thereby create witnesses? Unless it was done on purpose in order to mislead them. Exactly. Someone dressed up as Carmen in order to frame her. And that someone wasn't Runa. Did you already forget? She was downstairs in the restrooms. Carmen's the one who was missing the whole time. And we did recognize her clothes. There's absolutely no reason to think that Runa there instead of Carmen. But we can really be sure that Runa went to the restrooms? What do you mean? Right, Runa had been quite upset after Taiko had brought up the whole murder theory. Especially since he had told her that she was one of the suspects. As a result, she left the dining hall and went to the restrooms in order to calm down a little. Or at least that's what she told us, but how can we be certain that that would have been true? Before we followed her, we had another discussion with Taiko, so when we finally left the dining hall, Runa was already out of sight. Furthermore, we never checked the restrooms. We went straight to the second floor to check on Hiro and Carmen, so you're saying that Runa went to the second floor, disguised herself as Carmen, and then waited for us to stab Hero in front of our eyes? Exactly. Even before the murder theory had been brought up, Taiko had mentioned that someone needed to check on Hero and Carmen again. In other words, Runa had known that someone would head to the second floor soon. Realizing that Taiko had already suspected her, she had then decided to try and divert suspicion from herself by framing someone else. After coming up with an excuse to leave the dining hall before anyone else could, she quickly headed to the second floor. There she probably knocked out Carmen, who had still been all by herself in the hallway, before entering the guest room to kill Hero. Afterwards, she'd grabbed Carmen's costume and hid her unconscious body in some obscure corner of the room. Due to the darkness, we hadn't been able to spot her, especially since our attention had been drawn to something else. When we opened that door, we saw her sitting on Hero's dead body. The moment we laid eyes on that scene, she stabbed him again. By doing so while wearing Carmen's costume, she would ensure that we would think Carmen was the culprit who killed Hero at that very moment. I admit that your theory sounds plausible, but as was mentioned before, Carmen was missing during that time, and she didn't want to tell us what she was doing. So I'd still say it's more likely she's the culprit. I mean, accusing someone of murder just because no one checked if they went to the restroom is kinda well... I really did head to the restroom, Shinpuku-san, I swear. Just because you did not verify it doesn't mean I didn't. While that may be true, there are more reasons to suspect that you might have lied to us. What? After stabbing Hero, the cloaked figure escaped through the window. I followed her outside, but unfortunately lost her. With not much else of a choice, I went to the main entrance where I met Rai and Bara-chan. Together, the three of us went back inside. And now comes the important part. When we left reception, we met you, Runa. Just as you returned from the second floor. I already told you. After hearing Miyamoto-san's screams, I went upstairs to see what was going on. Is there anything wrong with that? Not per se, but I thought it was kinda odd. I mean, Rai and Bara-chan immediately rushed downstairs after I jumped out of the window. They never came across you though. That means you left the restrooms and went upstairs when the two of them had already reached the reception and gone outside. You really didn't notice any of that? The main entrance being open? Them shouting my name? You just perfectly missed each other. Why not? Is it so hard to believe? Well, I guess it's possible, but there's something else. When Bara-chan and Rai left the second floor guest room, in quite a hurry, I must add, they obviously didn't lock it. However, when we went up there again after meeting you, the door was suddenly locked. So you're saying that after escaping through the window, Runa hid somewhere in the thicket and waited until you were gone. Once the coast was clear, she climbed back up to the guest room, locked the door, and met you three in front of reception? Bingo. That's ridiculous. I have no idea how you'd come up with these things, Shinpuku-san, but I tell you, it's wrong. It's all wrong. No, it's not. It's the truth. The truth? Are you even listening to yourself? There's so much wrong with what you just said, I don't even know where to begin. For starters, how the heck would Runa have managed to climb back up to the second floor, huh? That's impossible. It's not. All she had to do was this. Oh shit. There was a rope hanging out of the window. Red rope. Can we do that one? That would work, wouldn't it? Maybe so, but how do you suppose I locked the guest room? I admit that it might seem rather strange that I was suddenly locked after I was there. However, Miyamoto-san was carrying the keys with it the entire time, so surely it could not have been my doing. Oh, you didn't need any keys. You merely made us believe the room with Hero inside was locked. And you used a very simple trick to achieve that. You moved the freaking Halloween sign. I'd finally figured it out. The reason why the guest room had suddenly been locked, and why after Rai had unlocked it, there'd be no trace of Hero's corpse. There could only be one explanation. Due to all the hectic and constant darkness, we never truly paid attention to the room numbers. However, we associated that dreadful room with something very specific. The piece of paper that was stuck to it. The Happy Halloween sign. Now, what if the sign was simply taken off and stuck to another door? Wait a sec. Sure, if that piece of paper was stuck to another door, that would explain why it was locked. But you tried opening the doors left and right of it as well, and neither of them would open. So all three of them are locked. We never actually tried unlocking them though. What if one of them was merely blocked from the other side, similar to the breaker room? For example, blocked by this. I don't know what that would mean. Blocked by... Oh, the thing was moved. Drawer. I found traces that the drawer was recently pushed in front of the door. No way. Are you serious? So Runa used the drawer to block the door and attached the Halloween sign to the neighbouring room. Yes, that's why we thought it was locked and my hero's corpse was gone when Rai opened it. We simply checked the wrong room. And since Runa was just coming from the second floor when we left the reception, only she could have done it. You're really trying to pin this all on me, are you not, Shinpuku-san? Well, you are the culprit. Hold your horses for a sec. Again, Carmen was missing all that time, so it's possible she could have switched out the sign and blocked the door. Indeed. I have to admit, this is quite a fascinating tale you've been weaving here, Shinpuku-san. However, I'm growing tired of these baseless accusations. Earlier you said you have proof that I'm the culprit, but as of yet, such proof has not been presented. Therefore, I ask you, where exactly is your proof? Could it be that there is none? Which would only make sense as I did in fact never kill anyone tonight. Huh, looked like she was starting to get serious now. Well, of course it wasn't going to be that easy. Right now, all I had told them was really nothing more of a fancy fantasy. In order to turn this fantasy into reality, I had to provide evidence. I had to somehow prove that these things really happened and weren't just a figment of a vivid imagination. And that was exactly what I was going to do. I could see it in your eyes. You do not intend to give up so easily, do you? Fine then. If you have proof of my crimes, please show it to me. I'm most curious as to how you intend to do that. All I had to do was prove that when we'd witnessed Hiro's death, the person sitting on top of him and ramming the knife into his throat had been none other than Runa. That was all I needed to do, and I certainly could. Alright, first of all, I'd like to confirm something. Earlier tonight, you said something rather peculiar. Actually, I brought 2 matching green wigs, but unfortunately forgot them at home. I cannot believe I was so careless. Once again, my deepest apologies, Mori-san. I had not remembered that. Now that's a detail. Oh, Runa. I told you it's fine. Stop worrying about that. It's no biggie, really. The fact that they wore the same costume was, her and Momoko had worn the same costume was one of the reasons why I thought she was the killer. Even if you say that, I cannot help but feel quite ashamed of myself. After all, I was the one who claimed to know where to get the perfect wigs and promised to buy them. And then I forget them at home, even after you reminded me just this morning not to? You said you forgot the wigs, didn't you? I did indeed. So, if you hadn't forgotten to bring them with you, it would have made everything perfect. As a huge fan of Twin Sisters Sacrifice, you will undoubtedly know that one of the 2 sisters sport a hairstyle very similar to Carmen's, in shape as well as colour. You might have told us otherwise, but I'm pretty sure now that you were the one who proposed the idea of cosplay, to cosplay the 2 sisters to Momoko. Because from the beginning, not only were you planning to disguise yourself as Carmen and blame the crimes on her, you also knew the rope would come in handy, as well as the blood on the front of the kimono. What does that have to do with anything? Why would the fake blood be of importance? Because it hides the real blood, of course. What are you insinuating now? When I found Carmen's cape and hat, there was some blood on them. That means that when Hiro was stabbed, his blood got onto the culprit. There's no blood on Carmen, as anyone can clearly see, but Hiro's blood did get on you. We just haven't noticed because your kimono was already bloodstained to begin with. What? Hiro's blood got onto Runa? Yes, I'm pretty sure that once the police perform a blood test, they'll confirm my suspicions. They'll find traces of Hiro's blood in your kimono. Runa didn't reply. She just stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before on her. An expression of anger and resentment. There were still a few remaining questions, but there was no doubt that Runa had to be the one responsible for Momoko and Hiro's death. She had a motive, she had opportunity, and quite frankly, at least when it came to Hiro, no one else could have done it. All we had to do now is wait for the police to arrive and confirm it. Is it true, Runa? Did you really? Hey, come on, say something. Why should I? No matter what I say, my words won't be believed anyway. Isn't that right, Shinpuku-san? Are you admitting it then? Well, I guess you didn't want to. Without saying anything else, Runa stood up and simply retreated to a corner of the dining hall, signaling all of us to leave her alone. Rice still tried to follow her and talk to her, of course, but Runa ignored even her. While the others simply remained silent, unsure of what to say, I turned to Carmen, who still seemed a little shaken. I tried to assure her that everything was going to be okay now, and that no one was going to accuse her of being a murderer anymore. For some reason, she didn't really seem happy or relieved though. I guess she still had to come to terms with the fact that her best friend was dead, and that she was never going to see her again. While we waited for the police to arrive, Taiko and I continued discussing on a few more things. He was still puzzled by what happened to Kotoba. If Runa was the culprit, how exactly had she started the fire? And why would she have wanted to kill Kotoba as well? It was an obvious motive for Hiro and Momoko, but Kotoba? It certainly was strange. There were also a few other pieces of evidence that didn't seem to fit in anywhere. They made me wonder if I'd missed something, although it could have only been minor details. In any case, when the police finally arrived, I presented them my deductions, and they immediately decided to take Runa into custody. They took her back to the station for questioning and promised to perform a blood test as soon as possible. Of course, they still wanted to conduct a thorough investigation, and asked the rest of us a lot of questions as well. However, we were at least allowed to return home to get a good night's rest first. When I woke up the next day, the results of the blood test were already in, and they were quite conclusive. As it turned out, not a single speck of Hiro's blood had been found on Runa's kimono. In other words, my deductions had been completely wrong. The real culprit had been someone else all along. When I learned the actual truth, I couldn't believe it. It was vastly different from the one I'd arrived at, but I guess that's what happens when you disregard most of the evidence and base your deductions almost entirely on assumptions. I hadn't paid enough attention to the details. My overconfidence had caused me to jump the gun and draw faulty conclusions, something I'd always tried so hard to avoid. But the worst of it all was that I blamed someone innocent for all those horrible crimes, and that I'd even managed to convince most of the others of my theory as well. Of course, I tried to apologize to Runa, but from that day forward she ignored me. She never spoke a single word to me ever again. As did Rai and Carmen. But it's not like I could blame them. I'd messed up big time. And I guess that was my just punishment for my arrogance. Okay, we failed again. I still don't know what the answer is. I'm going to wrap this one up here, because it's a very long episode. We're going to jump back in later and try someone else, I guess. Until then, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.